You know what I mean?
Perfect.
We don't need no education.
Love it.
Well, not true.
We don't need no thought control.
Okay, maybe we don't need thought control. We agree with that, but we do need some form of education. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. We know that Damien doesn't do that, which is good. Michelle, occasionally. To the bridge. Tanya's here. Joanne is here. Sasha's still connecting. I've just completely stolen your thing, Nicole, by the way.
This is way better than anything I could do to start off. So we're good here.
So before we even get into this deep dive conversation, there's two things I want to know from this wonderful group. First of all, Our Good 37, did your parents give you that name?
Yes. Definitely, they did.
They did?
They did.
They were like
Yeah.
Elon Musk ahead of their time. They were like...
Definitely ahead of their time. Definitely.
What is your...
I just went tick there. Let's just get in this.
Love it.
Rosalind's my name.
Perfect. Ros, excellent. Second thing I want to know is, did anyone have this experience at the start of the pandemic? Because I heard a story from a teacher where kids figured out early on they could change their name in the Zoom to connecting ... and then they would just blag their lessons during homeschooling, and the teacher would go, oh, they must be having trouble with the internet, but they just wrote connecting ... Did anyone experience that? No. Oh, because I kind of thought that, isn't that the perfect example of creativity? Like the kids
That is
leading the way. Yeah, genius. Anyway.
That's great. I also heard a story of a bunch of students in a school in regional Queensland that managed to edit all of the details on Google for the school, including the address, like the main photo for it. Like they just went to town. And there was this little part of me that like heard about it and understood that the leadership team needed to take disciplinary action. Like I could get it, but there was this part of me that was like, oh, but it's so entrepreneurial that I just kind of love it. Like the fact that they were like, I reckon we can do this, and then just went deep into the tech, probably not that deep, but my rudimentary understanding of tech, it seems complex, and then just went about rebranding the school on their own behalf. So,
I love it. That is so good.
I mean, probably the perfect way to segue into our second session, unpacking all things curiosity and creativity. I want to kick off and just take some time to maybe talk about our first creators, certainly for us here on these lands, our First Nations people, incredibly my dog's very insistently needing a pat right now, so I'm just going to multitask while I do. And just take some time to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we're living and meeting and playing, I think. And so I'd love it if you could drop in the chat where you're coming to us from. I'm in Mianjin on Yagara and Turrbal land. And I often start by talking about, in education, we often feel this real pressure to recreate everything. There'll be a new pedagogy come in, or a new fad, or a new movement, and there's this overwhelming sense that we constantly have to rewrite who we are and how we teach in the classroom. And I probably want to kick off by acknowledging that I believe that true creativity and innovation comes from understanding our past and honouring that. I think it's actually in acknowledging those that have walked before us and their wisdom and the culture and the heritage and the history that sits in that space. And then I believe that that's actually almost the catalyst for creation moving forward. So our best creations come from everywhere that we've walked in our past, like our histories and our culture and our parents and our grandparents and everybody else who's kind of collided to create who we are. And I think it's the same thing. So I just want to honour, I guess, our First Nations past and present, and what's emerging out of what I know is going to be a very curious conversation. I mean, we started off with music. You can't really get much better than that. Maybe we should start off, Mike, by checking in with who joined us for the first session or watched the first session if you weren't live. Maybe just drop in a, yep, seen it, and then we know we can kind of leapfrog from that space. Thumbs up from Joanne. Good to see you again. I'm sorry to hear you're not well.
Great. Look at all these returning for more punishment.
It's true. It's true.
Damo was here. Michelle, how dare you? You've stumbled in. No, not at all. Michelle, you're so welcome. Don't apologize at all. We've been
I'm
waiting
not angry. I'm just
and honestly,
disappointed.
first session wasn't very good. This is going to be the one.
So I think maybe for those that are jumping in for the first time, Mike, I might get you to, the thing is I'm testing you because you're going to have to creatively reshape your introduction about who you are.
Yes.
Tell us who you are without repeating who you said you were in our first session.
I am a father of a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, almost 6-year-old in a week. I was born on Ghana land in North Adelaide. I'm addicted to people falling back in love with who they are and rediscovering and reclaiming their unique self-expression and finding ways of bringing that to the world. And I'm very excited. I've always done that through a different range of different guises. I've somehow ended up in this big end of town corporate machine world where they need a bit of help doing that. But also I'm finding multiple avenues, thanks to Nicole and others, into the education space, which is very timely because my kids are now in school. One is. And this is lighting me up in a big way to think that we should be, having these incredible conversations about the education system and what we can do. So I think that was different to last time.
Yeah, I think you do. I give you a B+. I think you've done all right. Well done.
I like it.
No, you did excellent. So for those that haven't joined us for our live learning sessions before, my name's Nick Dyson. I'm the founder of Future Anything, and I guess testament to our name, we really believe that young people have the potential to shape our future through their innovative and creative ideas. And over the last 5 years working with schools, one thing that we've stumbled into in our research is that the one capability that young people seem to struggle with the most is this creativity and innovation. They feel as they move through our education system, they seem to lose that enthusiasm, I guess, for creativity and innovation. And we tend to kind of really converge their thinking rather than diverge their thinking. And it will be no surprise to the educators in the room that when we started actually surveying teachers on their confidence in their own creativity, interestingly, our young people are struggling, but so are our educators. And so, in having seen Mike's wonderful work before, I was really curious as to how we could potentially unlock the creative energy of our educators and then look to see that shift in our young people in the classroom, which is what brings us to this 3-part conversation. The first one where we looked at what is creativity and kind of picked at the scab of our own relationship to creativity. And then today we're going to dig from there into talking about how we can actually start to build this in as part of our practice. But maybe for those that maybe missed that first session, can those who were there, I would love to hear, Damien, I know you've got some that you can share. What were some of our little creative moments we kind of experimented with over the last couple of weeks? Is anybody brave enough to camera on and share? Maybe we kind of dared, is dared the right word? Challenged is probably the more nicer way to put it, but it was a little bit like truth or dare. Please bring a little bit creativity into the next couple of weeks for our participants last time. Is anyone brave enough to kind of share what one of those moments might have been?
I will jump in, and sorry, I don't have my camera on. Hopefully you can hear my croaky voice. So the thing that stuck with me from the last session was we really unpicked what creativity means to us. And I loved, Michaela, I loved your reference about, it being a natural expression of your unique self. And that stuck with me. And I loved the video. I'm so passionate around, being able to help everyone thrive in the school environment and bring their unique self to bear and feel confident and powerful with that. That the video looked at you know, as you get older and you get, you know, invited to kind of conform with this system, how the character in the video, the light and the sparkle starts to dim over time. And it was really beautiful, really moving. So I've shared that with a few of my friends already because I loved it. So thank you so much.
Amazing. Yeah, it was beautiful video. I should add, by the way, I promised you all books and I've got them now. I actually ran out. I was promising everyone and I didn't even have any, but I got 1,000 finally delivered on Monday. So you will get them. And for those of you that are joining this call, you know what? I'm going to give you a book as well. So you can sort that out with Nick. I've got all your deets, the people that did. It's coming. It's in the post. Trust me. It will be tomorrow.
That's amazing. I thought you just conveniently forgotten about those.
No, I was like, oh, I promised, and you're not the only ones I promised. I promised another group, like this business. They actually bought them. They bought, 150. I'm like, yeah. Oh, hang on. I've only got 4. So it's all good now. But anyway.
My favorite part is that everyone was too polite to call you out on it. So they've all come back today going, oh,
So
I haven't
lovely.
received my book,
Yeah.
but that's okay. It was a really nice gesture. And
Can I share something? I had a thought. I want to, I'll run straight into this conversation because I know it's limited. Everyone's got to go and stuff like that. So there's a friend of mine, Aaron McEwen. He works for Gartner. He does a lot of research right around the world. He's kind of a real thought leader in talking about the future of work. And he's very eloquent in the way that he speaks. And he's been sharing a lot about how organizations really need to pay attention because there's a huge shift going on, similar to the shift that happened when companies finally realized, oh, customer experience. Wow, we need to personalize it. We need to actually care. We need to get to know them. And that was a revelation, a decade or more ago. It was like, what do you mean we have to have individualized campaigns for people? Can't we just send one campaign to all 50,000 people? No, they're human beings. They have their own likes, tastes, fears, hopes, dreams, aspirations. The pandemic has now created this world for employment, where now employers are having to, it's the same revolution is taking place where they now have to stop seeing these employees as just products to be mined, extracted, value to be squeezed from them. What do you mean you've got an issue? Take it up with HR. Oh, it's not in your contract. Too bad. Rah. That's all done now. People are like, you know what? I'm going to go work somewhere else. I want an experience that moves me or that inspires me or that I can grow or that I can travel or whatever it is. There's a huge thing happening right now. And the skills that are, as we know from these conversations and a lot of Nick's work, the skills that are massively in demand and will only be increasingly so is creativity. And this struck me when in thinking about these conversations that we're having, because what is the world that we're preparing these kids for? And are we setting, like, it will be in 10, 15, 20 years so different. The way that employers will view that relationship between employee and employer, or businesses or startup, whatever it is, it's going through this huge transformation right now. And these kids are, in school. So how are we preparing them for that world that is still being, co-authored right now? And it really is. We've got to set them up in a way that they're adaptable and they can deal with the complexity and they can dance with the ambiguous and they can have fun when they fail, when they can be playful and joyful and lean into some pretty wicked challenges that are coming. And I just thought that might be a nice frame to also set up, when thinking about how we can bring creativity into our practice, just as a nice anchor point for the world of work. The business world is really starting to pay attention to, oh, wow, hang on. It's not just, the whole model that we've had for employment is now changing in a radical way. And those relationships are between employer and employee are changing radically. So it's another thing to think about with like, oh, this is the world they're going to inherit.
I think that's a really critical place to start, especially in conversations with educators. And when we start to get to the pointy end of the senior schooling system, there's this real pressure from teachers where they're like, my gosh, I've got to prepare them for the test, because the test is where they're going to get the ATAR, and the ATAR is when they're going to get uni, and then uni is they're going to get the job. So I don't have time for creativity because I need to make sure they're ready for the test. Mm-hmm. And it's a curious little rabbit hole we get into, because I feel like the more we spoon feed young people the less able they are to cope in situations like tests, because they don't have the resilience or the creativity to manage when they're confronted with something that's unpredictable, because they're so used to us making everything predictable. And so creativity is almost the antithesis of predictability in a sense, because you're actually allowing divergent thought. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Mike, and kind of that contrast, which I guess is the same in the work system, right? Because we're kind of like, gosh, we want everybody to do their job. And so if we get you to think creatively, does that mean that you're not going to do your job? It's kind of this, they kind of butt heads against each other in some ways.
And the work will move to be like, particularly, thought work or white collar work or, whatever, knowledge work, sorry. That's all going to be, how do you find and form new value? So that everything else will be automated, algorithm, rah, rah, rah. So it really is going to be, what are you bringing to the table? What can you see that we can't see? It's interesting. I mean, just thinking of the book, it just kind of reminded me, which you'll all get, so this will make more sense. But a map is only as good as it is useful. So a lot of the time, like we all we're educators, we love having models and frameworks and 3 top tips and tools and stuff. And I'm not a big fan of that, but hey, if it's useful, let's use it. And there's 4 kind of frames that I go into in this book, which you can check out eventually. There's 3 parts. The first is preparing the canvas. So it's really setting up your mindset for what does it mean to be an everyday creative. The second is developing a practice. And then the third is making your masterpiece. And we're kind of borrowing a little bit of that in these sessions Nicole and I are doing with you. Is like, okay, the first one, let's prepare ourselves mindset. Second one, what does it look like to develop a practice? And the third one would be, well, how do we make our masterpiece? So developing a practice, there was 4 frames that I broke it down into for this book. And again, take it or leave it, it's just a model. But there's seeking, feeling, making, and giving. And I think that these might be useful for you to bring as frames to bring in, how do I inject creativity? You remember we talked about in that first session, almost subversively, almost underground, without, okay, I've got to follow the curriculum, I've got to get them prepared, I've got to do the tick, 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 tick. But what's some other things I can creep in at the side? What's my Trojan horse? How am I also influencing them to think and feel and be in a particular way? And seeking is in obviously that curiosity piece. Try as much as we can to instill this idea of what else? What's another question you can ask? Where can you go further with this? What have you missed? What have you not considered, et cetera, et cetera. Feeling is going to be crucial. Making sure, maintaining that they stay connected or actually develop and enhance the full spectrum of all the sensibilities that they have, all the senses they have. That short film we watched, and there'll be a link for those that missed it, but the short film we watched in that first session, that's all about losing our sensory awareness, losing the parts in us that move us. The feeling, feeling is the new thinking in this modern world. And we need to help them as much as possible, keep and retain and trust and lean into their emotion or their intuition, or when they send, in a gut, like even, I was talking with my kids the other day about when they're jumping off high things. I'm like, hey, look, you can do it. But before you do it, just check in with your gut. Does it feel like something you should do or not? And getting them to listen to their body and tune in, keep that connection. So seeking, feeling, making, get them making. I mean, there was a comment around failure before in the chat thread. You will learn 1,000, these kids will learn 1,000 workshops worth of creativity in one 45-minute session of making something, of just play. And I mean, this, but as a reminder, it's the making is where the magic happens. It's where everything comes to pass. They learn and they, you're like, it's incredible. But I think a really crucial piece as well is to instill in them this idea of giving. So whatever they learn, whatever they create, they give it away. They share the knowledge, they share the insight, they share the outcomes of their, of their process, of their creativity, of how they're feeling. We make this communal and collective so that they start developing a practice, and you as well, but they start developing a practice of not feeling as though they've got to do it all themselves, not thinking that they have to come up with the answers themselves, not thinking that they have to be this lone genius Instagram influencer, that actually it's all in, the more you give, the more you get. the faster we go is, you know, when we just share what we're learning together and et cetera, those kind of skills and frameworks, I would think, to start building a practice in around those 4 frames might be useful, not just for the kids, but also for ourselves. Where are we being curious every day? How are we tuning into our feelings every day? How do we feel about this? You know, sitting with that. What are we making every day? Are we making something? Are we creating something? And then are we sharing that with the world, or are we sharing what we learned about it? And that, you know, from that, I think there's developing a practice around that can be really powerful.
Mike, I'd love to know, because obviously in your work, like across different systems and organizations, what does this look like in reality? Like, give us some examples of where you've seen organizations really take this framework on board and then start to change that daily practice.
Being inside a container, like once they've had an experience. So we showed that short film. A lot of the time in the work that I do, people need to have an experience. You can talk about it in the abstract. We can talk about it on this call, and you know, you get it and it sounds nice. No, it's familiar, and oh, that's something new I haven't heard yet. But when you've had an embodied experience, when you've had something affect you in some way, it's hard to have that undone. It's hard to forget, at least for a little while. So once we've had some kind of experience where they get reconnected to who themselves, they get reconnected to an idea of what could be possible for their organization, then from that place, it's very quickly to, okay, now we need this container. We got to get in action. We got to create something. We've got to make something every day if possible, weekly, whatever it is. There needs to be a cadence, and there needs to be somewhat this sense of accountability, but not in a, you have to do this to become blah. More in a community, it's a joyful, there's going to be an end game and the celebration. It's like a sprint. It's a, you know, so we just want to instill a habit. We want to instill a ritual, instill a practice. So we're creating this peak moment. So they have this peak experience, and then we want to build momentum, letting them know that it's on the journey. And then we will have this, you know, final event type thing where we celebrate and everyone goes, oh, that was great. But hopefully by that point, we can say, hey, do we even want to stop doing this now? Is this something we want to make and integrate into our day, into our workflow, into our policy, into our blah, 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 blah. So that's what works effectively with organizations. And I could imagine it would work the same with kids or teachers.
Yeah, I really like, I want to draw particularly the educators in the room back on that one critical element you started with, which is that embodied experience, like that elevated. I sometimes nerd out and use like the structure of a short story to explain how a unit should run. And we talk about like an inciting incident at the beginning of the unit. Mm-hmm. And I just want to draw attention to the fact that most of us as educators kind of default in how we introduce learning. And that's where we sit down and we kind of unpack the unit overview. And we're like, cool. So over the course of the term, we're going to be learning, and we kind of like roll out this like massive sheet of paper and kind of like lump the end assessment task on them. And it's very heavy, I think. And so then you've got a battle for the next 10 weeks to kind of claw back any sense of engagement from that experience. And so I think when you were speaking there and you were talking about that peak experience and then using that to then draw action from, it made me reflect on how we honor the beginnings of learning experiences and how we create like an elevated inciting incident at the beginning that we can then use to almost create traction and momentum. I'm a big believer in project-based learning and inquiry-based learning as like a pedagogical tool. I mean, you use pedagogy for purpose depending on the learners and the learning environment. But the notion of a showcase experience at the end of a learning journey is so powerful because we actually transform assessment into a celebration of learning, as opposed to this really transactional exchange where I'm like, here's my paper, and then the teacher marks it and you get it back and you don't read the feedback. You kind of just look at the grade and it's all, and then it gets shoved in a folder with your name on it that you never see again. Whereas like the making and then the sharing, there's something really powerful that happens not only for learning communities, but relationships between young people and their parents. Like as a parent, when you walk in and you see your young people sharing learning, like that's a really transformational experience where you see that young person in a completely different light. So I was reflecting on those phases of seeking, feeling, making, sharing, and going, my gosh, that's kind of how a unit of inquiry should really run if we think about that building momentum from a place of curiosity and that elevated inciting incident.
Mm-hmm. What you just said was incredible, Nicole Dyson. You're amazing. That was so compelling to me. I love it, because I just think that can be applied to everything. And you've inspired me, because I think you could almost switch seeking and feeling. Not that it has to be sequential, but feel first. Hit them with something that they're like, oh my God, I feel it. Now I'm curious. Now I want to know more. Okay, cool. You want to know more? Then let's start making. Let's not talk about it. Let's get our hands dirty straight away. Oh my God, we're building, we're in. And I love the way you framed that in the end there about a celebration as opposed to an assessment. And the beauty of that is that you can then celebrate. So it's such a broader palette of things you can celebrate and acknowledge, which is not necessarily just the result. It's not just your handed in paper. You can celebrate the hard work. You can celebrate when Tina sharpened pencils for Tommy. You can celebrate when someone stayed back and cleaned up the classroom, or all these other things that enabled that learning to take place. So you can expand beyond just, again, here's this 6-question test that you need to do. It's like, yeah, but look at all the things that happened over the last term that now we get to reflect on, and what worked and what didn't, and how great was it when Betty did that, blah, 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 blah. And then they're pumped, then holidays is like, term 3, what do we got? That first week is just going to be, whoa, we're on some festival of adventure and experience. And then they're in. You've got that buy-in, like, I've signed up. What are we up for?
Oh,
It's revelation.
I want to ask a bit of a provocation, because I feel like what we're talking about, requires something that can be challenging for educators, which is relinquishing control of the learning environment. Because creativity is messy. And I often have these conversations with teachers where, even today I was working with 90 year 6 students, and this is a school that I've worked with for the last 3 years. I love them. I love the young people. Like, they bring me, every time I walk in, I feel like this real joy in being in the room. They're awesome. And the young people are building these market products, right? And I watch the teachers wander over to the students, and instead of asking a question, the teachers provide an answer. And I watch this ability of educators, this really challenging space where, you get into this role because it's a vocation, you want to help, you don't want anybody to fall in the cracks, like, you're committed to every young person making it over the end. But in doing so, it's like we control every outcome, and unfortunately, or fortunately, creativity is messy. And then sometimes you actually have to step back so that young people can step up. And so I want to unpick that a little bit. Like, can you have creativity and control in the same space?
100%. Like what, a painting needs a canvas. There's got to be some container, some barrier. Without that, you need paints and paint brushes and all those things as some form of process, or their tools, or their control, so to speak. But I think it's a switch. Like, it requires all kinds of things. Like, if I'm going to put an album together as a musician, there's a whole bunch of like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm playing with sounds, I'm playing with rah, or I'm getting a coffee and I'm thinking about heartbreak, and that's all that stuff. But then when it comes to the recording process, that is so technical and quite boring, to be honest. There's a lot of really like, okay, I've got to make sure that mic is EQ'd there and this, and we've got to put that there. And there ain't a whole lot of, when my baby left me, there's just not that in that part of the process. I think, again, this is maybe where we need to redefine what creativity is. It's not just the colorful dancing around a fire underneath the moonlight. It's making sure you packed enough chords, to hold that festival out there. It's ensuring that you've got a fire warden and a security guard. Like, it's all of it. It's all of it all of the time. That's why, and even going back to that first thing around what creativity is, it's a life force, it's an energy. So it can be, you can approach, the more technical parts of our role, or the thing, hey, we need to test you guys. But that the energy, our intent we can bring to that can be vibrant and alive, or it can be, I'm just going through the motions. And when we're vibrant and alive in that more, a bit more of a controlled space, what might emerge as a result of that, just purely from pushing some different energy in that space, without the singing Kumbaya and whatever else. There was one thing that came up to me. I know we're talking a lot. I'd love to jump over to you guys as well if anyone's got questions or observations. But one thing I can imagine as well, correct me if I'm wrong, educators on the call, but is it tricky if we're thinking about, hey, start the term, do this amazing experience, get the buy-in, and then, you know, get them curious, start them making on something and then celebrate at the end. Would there not also be a whole lot of, oh, we don't do that here, from your peers or from your superiors maybe, or no, I saw you take the kids out on the oval. I'm not sure that that's part of our policy. I could imagine maybe there'd be that also that might have to be navigated. There you go, Tanya. And don't for a second think that this isn't every organization too, by the way. It's the same thing. Some passionate HR people person or experienced person is like, we're going to do things differently. And they come in and then everyone's like, sorry, who invited you? No. We tried that once 17 years ago. You know?
We talk about squishy face. Like sometimes it's not even what's said, but it's in like the staff meeting. And like you've got like this, you know, really enthusiastic introduction to something new, and you just see like the colleagues in the back row, they're like,
yeah, squishy face.
You know, it doesn't need to say anything. It's like just the look, and it like squishy face is the killer of creativity, right? Because as soon as you see that, your insides kind of fold in, and then you lose that like risk-taking ability to share. Tanya.
I was just going to jump in at that because that sparked, you know, the emotion in me, the feeling, because I went from a school that was completely project-based learning and pushed projects at any point they could to an environment that ran very traditionally. And so the idea of running any hook event in lead up to one of my units, that was a no-no. Wow. And how dare I think of changing how they do things that work. In their minds they worked, but you could see the disengagement in all the students. So yeah, so when you said that, it was like, oh, I've lived this. I know this feeling. Yeah.
Wow.
Thanks for letting me share.
And what did you
think that? Oh, sorry.
No,
Michael,
you're right,
I won't cut you
right.
off. I was just going to say, Tanya, you would have encountered this sense in schools that it's like project-based learning versus explicit teaching for some reason, that you can't have both, like that it's state of origin, where it's one or the other, and you can't possibly have different pedagogy for purpose. And I think we have to really strip away that and look at what's the best learning experience for the moment in time with the young people that you're working with.
There are very much moments in time that have to be explicit teaching moments, whether it be teaching students how to research, whether it be teaching students some of the content, whether it be, you know, teaching them the skills in how to create creativity within themselves or spark critical thinking. Those explicit teaching moments need to go hand in hand with any project. They're not a given. Until you've actually taught the students those skills, they can't invest in any project because they don't know how to do it. So it is a mix of both, a marry of both. But you're right in what you're saying in terms of the feeling and getting that emotion for the buy-in, for the learning journey. Otherwise, you'll lose them. They won't invest their time and energy.
And that could be a beautiful, like a gateway for us in building our creative practice or extending it and expanding on it, is to be playful, curious, you know, feeling, making, giving of, all right, how am I going to do this? How am I going to create this moment, this buy-in, this hook experience, whatever it is? How am I going to do it differently this term? Like how that could be our own practice that we're developing, and even starting almost every session. Like I do this. I speak a lot, and I rarely. It's rarely the same. There are moments sometimes that might be the same, but it's just fun to think differently and change it. And I remember a mate of mine reminded me of this the other day. There was a while many years ago, I'd do my keynote backwards, and I'd walk out and say, "Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it." And everyone would go, "Yeah." And I go, "My name's been Michael Dixon, you know, and I go, but if there's one thing I want you to walk away from, this is blah, 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 blah." And I'd systematically, and it was just bizarre for me. And they kind of didn't know. And it wasn't until I got to the end that I'd be like, "Hey, how did that go for you? I just did my keynote backwards." And then it'd be kind of interesting and fun. But that challenge kept me on my toes and it kept it fresh for me. And I remember one gig specifically, and this is no just disrespect whatsoever, I shouldn't probably say, it was an association, and it was not an exciting association, you would think. And it was probably one of the most exciting gigs I've ever done, because it was just so like, okay, I can't believe I'm going to try this in this environment. But people were really responsive, and they were like, wow, this is what is going on here. You know, and so even to think about that, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. Like, there must be some subjects that are like, oh God, really? We got to do this? You know, how can you be like, all right, cool. Here we go. It's time for me to switch on my creativity and role model it and demonstrate it, and almost empathize with how it might be for the kids, you know, when we're asking them to do these things and be creative and lit up by particular topics, and we're not even lit up by them. You know what I mean?
I think the energy, like we talked about, compelling educators delivering compelling curriculum. So you have to be feeling what you're teaching in order for young people to feel what you're teaching. Like, that's really critical. And the other thing I want to, and look, this won't sound sexy, but like, data can really help you here. And I think we need to stop being fearful of using data to support the pedagogy that we know that works for young people. And we talk about these capabilities, like, you know, creativity is the skill that can be measured, like, and you can actually see progression with young people with that skill. So benchmark them at the beginning of a unit. And we've got a bunch of tools that we can send through that we use to kind of test young people's confidence in creativity. Run like a series of activities explicitly to build that capability, and remembering that those activities need to be not attached to assessment of any kind, because as soon as it's got like a performative layer to it, there's no safety to play. So that needs to be decontextualized from the assessment that the students are doing. But run a series of activities that actually increase the complexity to build the capability of creativity, and then post-test the students and ask them how they enjoyed like playing and making and building and being creative, and then put that data together and present it and show like what you're able to do. Like, I think, you know, we have to use data to our advantage, because when you see this in action in classrooms, it works. Young people are engaged. You see differences, like we're building agency here. Like, creativity is like a cornerstone capability to agency. And I would say that my biggest challenge as an educator is when you're standing at the front of the room and young people are waiting for you to tell you, like, to tell them what to do. And then they're not capable of like problem solving without what you're spoon feeding, or finding a solution without you telling them where to look, or working collaboratively without you putting them in groups. Like, all of these things need to have self-awareness about these capabilities, which means we need to be explicitly building them in the classroom, which means we need to be benchmarking, we need to be measuring, we need students to own this data and see where they are and identify where they can improve. Like, we need to be just as rigorous with capabilities as we are with content. And actually, I would argue more so, because it's the capabilities that drive the content. If they don't have the capabilities, the content doesn't matter, because they can Google anything they want to know. So remembering, you know, the dates for the First World War mean nothing, because I can find that out. But having the agency to identify that information and hunt it down and do something with it, like, that's what we need our young people to be doing. And the cornerstone capability of that is creativity.
Nicole, I wanted to play this track behind you because data is sexy as far as I can see. The way that you just framed it. You know what I mean? I want you to do it again.
Who would have thought data would be this sexy?
And, you know, even going back to just building on what you're saying, it's so sultry, isn't it? We're taking your calls. This is Love Song Dedication with Future Anything. You love it, don't you? I love it.
I do. Yeah, a lot.
I want to call. Monty wants to call in. He wants to dedicate a song to someone. Monty, what would it be if you were going to dedicate a song to someone? What would the song be, and who would the person be?
Who would it be? It would be, I've got the song in my head and I watch it on YouTube all the time. I'm trying to think, and of course I can't remember the name because you put me on the spot.
Yes, love that.
Um,
You're gonna remember it at like 2 a.m. and
Yeah, I'm
then
gonna
have
wake
to,
up at
like,
2
get
a.m.
into-
and I'm gonna-
yeah, and then you're gonna say the song is, and send me the YouTube clip.
Yeah, I
That's
will.
great. Yeah.
Um,
Who's the person?
Born to be
who would-
alive. Born
Oh,
to be alive.
There we go. Very nice. And who would you dedicate it to?
Who would I dedicate it to? People in need. You know,
Yeah,
you just
beautiful.
gotta.
Look at that.
When you're in a bad space, it's an upbeat song and people are dancing, and they've done Born to Be Alive as pop-ups all in countries all around the world where
Yeah.
people are dancing and doing stuff. Whatever the guy's name is who created that song.
You know, that's such a beautiful idea though, Monty, like calling up a love song dedication and just dedicating it to whoever needs it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It's time. It's timing too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, whoever this is dedicated to, whoever needs this song. It's beautiful. You know, even thinking just and quickly, building on the conversations you were just having, I love that around, I just want to go back because if we were anchoring this a little bit around practice, how can we start to build a practice around this? One thing I'm 2 weeks into like a little, hey, it's time to get back in that health kick and, you know, no booze and eating really clean, up at 5 a.m, going to the gym and all that stuff. You know how hard it is to do that day 1, day 2, 3. Day 16, 17, where I'm at now, is starting to get a bit more fun. I know that day 28, I'm going to start finding that passion. Day 56, I'm like, I love this. Day 1, no, I've done 475 day 1s in a row. Trust me. I'm start tomorrow. I'll start Monday. You know, it's the thing. But then, because I don't have the passion for it yet, it's not, the inspiration and the passion comes later. And I think sometimes we can get lost thinking that we've got to wait for that strike of inspo and we're all like, now we're going to be this incredible creative person in the classroom. It's like, well, yeah, but also probably more likely is if we just little bits every day, just trying to do little discipline, building a ritual, building a practice, then we're like, hang on a second. The next time someone says, sorry, we did that 5 years ago, it didn't work. Yeah, well, it ain't 5 years ago now. We're going for it.
You need a buddy system. I couldn't do that. I couldn't get out of bed in the morning and do some exercise my doctor wanted me to do. I said, I got to have a buddy. And so I found a guy who lives above me and I said, hey, fat old man, come walk with me. And now we do it. And he knows I'm going to be there and I know he's going to be there. We got to show up.
You know what, Monty? Funny you say that because I do. I've got 2 different groups running at the moment. Well, there's 3. My band, we're all kind of getting fit together. My partner and another couple, and then another mate that lives up in Queensland. We're all I've got lots of buddies. But this is also what we touched on in the first call, the first session we did. It's crucial, these conversations, because you're all going back to different schools and you're going back to different communities and not everyone thinks like us yet. And so the importance of having these touch points, these communities, these buddies, to remind one another, to celebrate one another, to say, hey, I see you, you're fighting the good fight, me too, we're in this together, we're going to get there. It's crucial because going back into a world that doesn't support this yet is so tough alone. It's as tough, if not tougher, than trying to get that walk in first thing in the morning and eat that broccoli. I love broccoli.
Me too. I wonder if that's something I would definitely like reinforce that for educators that are in the room is like finding somebody else within the school that shares that want or that drive to create those classrooms. And then, you know, like team teaching is a hard one to manage at the best of times with timetables, but even just being able to set aside one morning tea break a week where you might actually catch up for 10 minutes over a coffee and talk about how it's traveling in both of your classrooms. Because I would say that one of the hardest things to do in schools is to drive any sort of change when you feel like you're the only one. Like if you feel like you're the island that's trying to move things differently, whether it's in organizations or schools, it's that isolation, I think, that dries out any drive that you have to create change. Whereas if you can get those short, sharp interactions with somebody else who's on your team and on your side, that can be the motivation that you need to continue. And also, I think it's just great professional practice to have somebody to bounce ideas around what works and what doesn't, and kind of evolve your practice as a result. I'm conscious. I feel like this was the same last time, Mike. We got to like 4:45, and I was like, "Can we just stay for another like 45 minutes?" And the time's just gone really quickly. But has anybody got any fast questions to finish with that we might be able to? We've still got one more session, so bear in mind that you have another 40. I mean, it'll be 50 minutes of the next one by the time we close off it as well. So there'll be another 50 minutes of fun when we catch up the next time. But I guess, again, the first session was unpacking or really picking up the scab of what is creativity. This one was really about digging into those 4 frames that Mike really touched on around the book, around seeking, feeling, making, and then sharing, and then overlaying, I think, some of that great pedagogy that we know PBL and inquiry-based learning sits within that. And then, Mike, where are we heading to next? Like, let's really light the fire about where we're going after this practice element too.
We're going to make our masterpiece, people. We're going to start to do those things, and so we'll start to lean into and trust. And I would, maybe we're doing less of the talking next time. And the invitation would be, if you can join us for the next one, to come with a particular project, or to come with an idea that you've got that you think, oh, okay, this has been swirling around in my head for 6 years, and I don't know where to start. I don't know what, but I'm passionate about it. I feel like we've all got one of them that's circling in the back. We know that it would be fantastic if we could start it. We know, it might terrify us. It might keep us up late at night. It might, whatever. It might be just a tiny whisper that comes out a couple of times a year because we're like, shut up. No, don't. Hush. I don't want to hear from you. But that thing, life is short, and it's also long at the same time, So it's like, we got to go. And then at the same time, it's like, well, come on, we've got the time to do these big, beautiful things. Let's start today. So that would be where I'd want to take the conversation next time, is like, you've all got ideas that could revolutionize the creativity in the education system in this country. We want to hear them, and we want you to start them.
Yeah. So bring your masterpiece to the next chat. And I'm going to dig into Joanne's question, because I think it's a really good one that we can definitely unpack further if it's a more project specific thing that you want to build culture around as well. But I want to echo what Tanya said around student voice and energy. I think that's critical. When it comes to shifting culture in any school, there's a couple of really tangible measures that are going to move your most maybe traditional leadership teams. The first one is data. Like, it's coming back to data is sexy. Like, can you benchmark your students, and can you show and looking at markers and measures like attendance and engagement, get those testimonials from students. I know it's scary as teachers to survey the experience that students have had in a learning experience, but my gosh, most of the time, it really fills your cup to hear about the parts of learning that students really jammed on. So the first thing that I would say is collect the evidence of the learning to support why you think this is important. What is your hypothesis that this learning experience is going to provide for young people? And then how can you prove it? I think that's really critical. The second thing that I would say is, in the work that we do with Activate, which is our curriculum embedded program, it culminates in this showcase experience where you've got these teams of young people that step up on stage and they pitch these innovative ideas. I've never, ever seen a principal not watch that and think, my gosh, why don't we have more of that in our school? When you see young people in their truth talking about stuff that matters to them in a way that is beyond their years, you can't argue with that moment. So don't underestimate the power of a showcase of learning in order to make visible the impact that this curriculum is having for young people. That's something and I think get really strategic about what the showcase is, when you're holding it, and who do you need in the room. So if the key decision maker that you need to convince is your principal, when are they most available? Schedule your showcase then. If the key decision maker you need to convince is your parent and caregiver stakeholder community, schedule your showcase at a time when those people can attend. Get really deliberate about who is it that I need to green light this? How do I curate a showcase experience that they can be present for? And it's very difficult to argue with really interested and interesting young people talking about stuff that they care about. So I would use those to lever, I guess, the conversation around culture. And the other thing that I would say is there is no, especially in the junior school, there's no ACARA police. There's no like teacher police. Like nobody's walking into your classroom to say, no, this is week 4 and you shouldn't, this isn't time for group work. Like nobody's actually standing in your classroom watching every learning experience you create. So stop acting like they're there and actually teach the way you know that your young people deserve, and teach the way that brings you joy, because as soon as you're joyful in the space, your young people will be joyful in their learning. And I think that's really important as well.
Feeling it today, Nick. You are on fire.
I am.
She's
just
spent 9 hours with these kids. You can see it, and she can't help herself. She's so passionate. And look at how engaged we are. Like you've lit a fire in me because you're so lit up by what you're sharing about. That's the perfect
sitting on my
embodiment.
soapbox.
Well, it's the perfect example of what we're talking about, isn't it? And that's something we can all do is we can reconnect to that thing that lights a fire in us, and then we just stand from that place, teach from that place, learn from that place, live from that place. Magic happens. You know?
100%. If all we did was plan the lessons we wanted to teach, like if you planned the teachable moments that you wanted to deliver, like your classroom experience would be transformed. Just plan the lessons you want to teach and then watch the classroom culture shift as a result of that. So, gosh, thank you, everyone. I will we will see you in a few weeks' time. And I'm so thrilled to really hear about your masterpieces. What's like the little thing that you've got in the back of your mind that you haven't been brave enough to say out loud? Maybe secretly you want to be a comedian and you haven't told anyone about it yet. Or maybe, Monty, you want to be like a radio announcer and actually be the person, be the person that's taking all these dedications in at like the 11 to 1 shift when it's all sultry and romantic. I don't know, but bring those masterpieces to our next session and let us help you get there.
I just want to pet your dog.
Me too.
Yeah.
And maybe even practically speaking, get it in your heads that maybe that's going to be an hour, you know, even though we say 45, just be like, hey, you know what? Because if we can really deep dive into what's important to you and what you want to make, the impact you want to have beyond just, the magic of what you're already doing. See you, Michelle. Get out of here. Get dinner on. I hope you have something nice for dinner, everybody. That's our last invitation. Have something delicious tonight.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for joining us. And we look forward to our next live learning session.
See you, Tanya.